Good afternoon. It is now 2 o'clock, and I will call the Employee Evaluation Oversight Ad Hoc Committee meeting to order. First, I would like to have Ms. Only call the roll.
Yes, ma'am. Malinowski.
Here.
McBride. Mackey. English.
Present.
Newton.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. I'll also note that Ms. McBride reached out to me to let me know that she had a conflict this afternoon and was not going to be able to attend. And I would also like to recognize our colleague Gretchen Barron, who has joined us today. So welcome, Ms. Barron. The next item of business is the adoption of the agenda. I'll entertain a motion.
Motion to approve.
Second.
And moved. Who seconded? Thank you. It's been moved and properly seconded. Will you call the roll, please?
Malinowski.
Yes.
Mackey.
Yes.
English.
Yes.
Newton.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Item number 3 is the approval of the minutes. There are several minutes that we have an opportunity to approve today, and the first is for July 27, 2021. I'll entertain a motion for that item or any others.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Moved and properly seconded to approve July 27. Call the roll.
Malinowski.
Yes.
Mackey.
Yes.
English.
Yes.
Newton.
Yes.
Motion passes.
This is a little bit out of order. I should have recognized that Chairman Livingston is also joining us, but I'm so used to him always being here that he's part of the fabric of our committee. But also welcome to you, Chairman Livingston.
I'm just partially here, so okay.
Well, from over here, you look like you're doing a very good job being here, sir. So welcome. Our next item is item 3B, the minutes for September 28th.
Motion to approve.
And move to
Second.
properly seconded. Call the roll.
Malinowski.
Yes.
Mackey.
Yes.
English.
Yes.
Newton.
Yes.
Motion passes.
For minutes, the minutes for October 14th, 2021, item 3C.
Motion to approve. Second.
Been moved and properly seconded.
Malinowski.
I will abstain. My reason is I was not present for that meeting.
Mackey.
Yes.
English.
Yes.
Newton.
Yes.
Motion passes.
That brings us to item 3D, the minutes for October 22nd, 2021.
Motion to approve. Second.
It's been moved and properly seconded. I will just have a quick note of discussion, which is, for the record, the motion that followed executive session had different candidate numbers for our meeting on October 22nd than they did on October 14th. That was something that was discussed in executive session but might not have been acknowledged when we came out of it. So if you would accept an amendment to the motion to approve the minutes with that modification. Could you? Thank you. Does the seconder of the motion accept that?
Yes.
Will you call the roll, please?
Malinowski.
Abstain, was not present.
Mackey.
Yes.
English.
Yes.
Newton.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Item 3E, the minutes for October 25th, 2021. I'll entertain a motion.
Motion to approve. Second.
Properly seconded, Ms.
Malinowski,
Abstain. I was on Zoom on this one, but it did not allow me to attend executive session.
Mackey,
Yes.
English,
Yes.
Newton.
Yes.
Motion passes.
And F is in final minutes for this agenda for November 4th, 2021. I'll entertain a motion.
Motion to approve. Second.
Been moved and properly seconded.
Malinowski,
Abstain, not present.
Mackey,
Yes.
English,
Yes.
Newton.
Yes.
Motion passes.
That brings us to our items for discussion. We have 3 items for discussion today, which are interrelated. The first item is the 2022 County Administrator Evaluation Process. It lists here that that item is for executive session, and that was depending on if we needed to discuss specific contractual matters related to that, we could go into executive session. But from my perspective, there is some initial conversation, at least, that we can have in open session if my colleagues would agree to that. More specifically, we previously had looked into vendors or outside consultants to help us with Mr. Brown's evaluation for 2021. Ultimately, what this committee recommended and council adopted was to instead use the evaluation firm that we used the prior year, Find Great People, for the 2021 evaluation, and then to look at bringing in a new evaluation firm for 2022. So there are some agreements that you have seen before that were included as separate cover under that. When we did I'm making eye contact with Ms. Lajiskin to see, we did a request for quote, we did a request for proposal, but we didn't do a formal solicitation process. So now that item is before us again, but if I may, mention something from item 4B, which I think would inform our discussion. We also now have a new county attorney who will also require an evaluation process. So depending on what this body wanted to recommend to council, we could either handle Mr. Brown's evaluation process as a separate evaluation, or if we wanted to do a solicitation for a firm that could help us with both, we do have those options. So again, the initial item before us is the discussion of the county administrator evaluation process, but we also need to discuss the county attorney and clerk to council performance evaluation as well. So I'll pause there, and Mr. Malinowski, you have the floor.
Yes, is there any reason we could not continue with the same firm that we are using now? The reason I say that is, let me ask Ms. Wadishkin first. I don't see anything in the information that was provided to us that says it's confidential, correct? From these 3 companies, Buck, Willis, and Pathways?
No.
Now? Is that good?
Yes.
Okay. Those were in response to a request for proposal, and so we would just want to limit the information that is publicly available should we decide to negotiate with any of those firms.
Okay. I would like to know, compare our, is there any reason the company we used, the consultant we used, did not submit one, or?
Yes.
You're speaking of Find Great People?
Yes.
Yes. So they were not invited to participate, and they no longer hold at the last time I checked, which has been a few weeks ago, they no longer hold a state contract. And so they would be involved in the same way that any other firm would be involved under open competition. At the time they were awarded the previous work, they were under state contract, which did not require us to publicly solicit for them.
Okay, these 3 are state contracts?
They are not.
Oh,
That is why
because there's
requested.
quite a disparity in the figures. I'll just generically state it that way.
May I add an additional piece of information? So, Mr. Malinowski, my understanding is that for this type of service, there is not a state contract that exists. And what we did at the time, which has been some time ago, is we were under a time deadline that we were trying to conduct it. So we did actually reach out to find great people, but they didn't have the capacity to submit a response for this work, which was more involved in the work that they did as it involved the 360 review. So if we were to go out and, I don't want to say re-solicit because we didn't technically solicit for this, but if we wanted to ask for additional quotes, it is highly likely that they would respond. It was just based on the timing and the turnaround that we had last time. They had so much work that they didn't feel that they'd be able to do it.
All right, thank you.
Ms. Mackey?
Yes, so I guess you were kind of laying out the framework of what you wanted to talk about here and then
Yes.
executive session, and so I wanted to make sure
Correct.
that
So,
I'm clear of what we're talking about out here.
sure. So for Mr. Brown, for the county administrator evaluation process for 2021, we have some proposals before us that are confidential as they're contractual, that we were looking at before we conducted his evaluation. And so before us, we have an opportunity to decide in advance how we would like to handle Mr. Brown's evaluation process for next year. I will point out for everyone's reference, Mr. Brown's agreement does specify that we'll use a third party to help us with that evaluation process, so that's not in question. It is more a question of, do we want to go with any of the firms for which we have contracts here, the discussion of which would require us to go into executive session? Do we want to send out a new request for quote? Do we want to send out a solicitation? And then possibly looking at the fact that we also have new personnel who will require evaluations, do we want to look at, if we're doing some sort of solicitation or request for quote, including those other personnel with that same vendor? I don't know if I clearly addressed your...
No, it did. Thank you. As I, just for the record, I'm pleased with the responses that we have. I think I've previously stated to Ms. Logistian that I just had a question regarding timing, and I wasn't sure if we gave all of them a time frame, because the pricing that they gave us, and some people list one time frame and another list a different, and so I just want to make sure we were comparing apple to apples when we looked at their price. But I thought they were all, fine proposals.
May I ask, Ms. Mackey, so given that I've laid that out and we do have the agreements before us, would it please the body to go into executive session to discuss these matters more in depth so we don't have to be so careful about some of the quotes and figures, or do you want to continue to have the conversation here in public session?
Motion to go into executive session to discuss the contracts for the county administrative evaluation process.
It's been moved to go into executive session. Do we have a second? I'll second it. Ms. Only, will you call the roll, please?
Malinowski,
No.
Mackey,
Yes?
English,
Yes.
Newton.
Yes.
Motion passes.
So it has been passed for us to go into executive session to discuss a contractual matter. Are we still live streaming? It looks Then, since all hearts and minds appear to be clear for executive session, I'll entertain a motion to come out of executive session.
Madam Chair, make a motion to come out of executive session.
Second.
It's been moved and properly seconded to come out of executive session. Ms. Only?
Malinowski.
Are we back on, okay, yes.
Mackey.
Yes.
English.
Yes.
Newton.
Yes.
Motion passes.
We are now out of executive session, which we entered to discuss a contractual matter. No actions were taken, or no votes were taken. We have requested that our staff person in procurement, pardon me, Mr. Malinowski?
Can I make a motion?
Okay, please.
I would make a motion that our procurement director proceed to get some answers to questions that came about during executive session.
Thank you, Mr. Malinowski.
Okay.
Been moved and properly seconded to direct our procurement staff to get additional information for us as discussed in executive session. Ms. Only?
Madam Chair?
Ms. Mackey?
Yes. Ms. Malinowski, can we add a date to your motion?
Absolutely.
Okay. So,
Big one.
can we say by our next committee meeting to have an update?
Yeah, when's that,
I don't know what date.
when's our next council meeting, 14th? Is Ms. Wadishkin over there? Can that be done by the 14th, do you think? Okay, then let's go with the 14th and hopefully we'll have it.
Thank you.
Good idea.
Malinowski.
Yes.
Mackey.
Yes.
English.
Yes.
Newton.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. That brings us to item 4B, the county attorney and clerk to council performance evaluation process. This is an item for discussion. We do have 2 new staff members. For those people who are new here, my understanding is that our previous county attorney did not actually receive a performance evaluation during his tenure there, and that is not a process that we would like to continue here. We also traditionally, as new employers, have periods where there's a feedback process, not just at your annual evaluation, but that there, are frequently check-ins at the 90-day mark. And so just as a body, wanted us to have a conversation about how we might want to recommend to the full body that we go about that mutual feedback process, and certainly that we be thinking about the evaluation process in advance so that we don't end up in a situation quick, fast, and in a hurry. Mr. Malinowski?
Attorney Wright, you bear the brunt of the new council members. We old people didn't care about evaluating your office.
We younger people do, if you're going to phrase it that way. Is that the extent of your comment, Mr. Malinowski?
Okay. I'm so glad us young people came around. Okay.
Thank you for calling me young, Mr. Malinowski.
So again, just wanted to have an initial conversation. Because county council does not have a robust history of conducting evaluations, I believe that Mr. Brown's evaluation that he had last year is actually the first county administrator evaluation that I am aware of. It's the first that I'm aware of. That no one could tell me of another one. So just wanted to, again, have a conversation about how we would like to go about this as a process. And if anyone has any thoughts that they'd like to share, we can have that discussion. And if not, that's something that can be food for thought that we can bring back to our next meeting.
I don't want to put the administrator on the spot, but if no one else has any thoughts or comments, he's one of the people that we're discussing for an evaluation process, and I'd like to get his thoughts on it. Was it too late, too hurried, not thorough enough? Maybe he could share something with us, and if you can't do it this time, you can bring it back at the next meeting.
And I will say, I do have some thoughts. I was just waiting for my colleagues. If you want, Mr. Brown, I would be happy to share thoughts first to give you a little cover.
I have something, Madam Chair. I'd also like, if it's okay or appropriate, to be able to speak with the county attorney and the clerk's office to see what they'd like to see as well in the evaluation process.
And Ms. English, just to clarify, are you saying that that's a conversation that you would like to have here in this meeting right now, or that's just a conversation that you would like us to have with those persons?
With those persons, not now.
Okay.
Thank you.
So what, Ms. Mackey, did you have a comment that you wanted to add?
Oh, no, go ahead, go first.
Okay. So a few things on the process. Number one, for this item in terms of the county attorney and the clerk to council performance evaluation process, perhaps looking at these two roles and things that we could learn from the past with Mr. Brown, I would like us to agree as a body as to these are the criteria that we would like to be evaluating the employees on an annual basis. And also, we're going to have a check-in at X point, whether it's 90 days or I know the clock has already started clicking for Mr. Wright, so maybe it's 120 days, but that we agree on what the criteria are. I think from a fairness perspective to our employees, they have a job description, and that's great, but at the same time, having those specific things that they're going to be measured against, I think is not just helpful, but I think is fair. And one of the challenges from my perspective with Mr. Brown's onboarding is that that's not something that happened. Mr. Brown came, he had a job description, and for his first evaluation period, and technically for his second as well, we cobbled together some criteria that were done after the fact, but there was not a conversation from my perspective that was detailed in advance that said, hey, Mr. Brown, these are the criteria that we're going to be using moving forward so that you can have periodic check-ins with him to say, okay, how's it going based on these criteria? One of the challenges of being a county attorney, or really probably any role in the county, is that there's great variability to what you're doing. And it's very easy to get pulled into other projects, which is not that you are neglecting any of the other duties that you're supposed to have. It's just that sometimes COVID happens, sometimes lawsuits happen, but having the formal criteria that we've agreed to, I think is helpful. And then also you're able to adjust that as circumstances change. So that's something that I would like to see. And again, not just the criteria that we're using on an annual level, but that we have set periodic check-ins where, again, it doesn't just have to be 90 days for our new employees or 60 days, but where we're regularly having that two-way process. I think waiting until the end of the year to have a conversation is difficult. And for me, one of my challenges in this role is I'm used to having managed employees as a singular human, so it is a lot easier to manage that feedback, but there has to be some process that we're using where we're collecting feedback from the body across the whole year. So those are some of the things that I would like to see moving forward and some of the challenges that I see with the process that was used with Mr. Brown. Ms. Mackey, did you have comments that you wanted to make?
No, not at this time.
Thank you. Are there any other council members before I proceed to returning the spotlight to Mr. Brown as provided by, yes, Mr. Malinowski?
Well, as Ms. English said, Mr. Brown can come, we can get his input later when we get it as well from the attorney's office and the clerk's office. It does not have to be today. I just threw that out as a suggestion to get some feedback from the administrator. But I'd like to make sure, and again, this was, the current consultant that we use, that these areas that we're asked questions about actually are areas that this council can give appropriate answers to. And for example, in this leadership section, responsible for the custody, safekeeping, and use of the county seal. I've never seen the county seal. I have no idea what he does with it. Oh, he carries it on him. No, that's a pin. We all got pins. Okay, but well, maybe that's not good safekeeping if you go out here and get mugged, and then they got it. So I'm just saying, there are some things in some areas here, like suspends, discharges, removes, or reassigns employees as needed. We get word when maybe somebody gets hired or fired But we don't know about the movement internally. At least I'm not aware of the movement internally and why it's maybe being done. I leave it up to his discretion. And those are things to me that the staff people would be more up to giving, I feel, better answers toward. You know, there's some other things in here that I just want to make sure that whatever we're giving to evaluate any of these groups on, that we actually can do it and not just make a guess. Well, yeah, I guess he's doing all right.
And if I could just address part of that, that's kind of one of the challenges because the criteria were developed after the fact. In order to get it done, what happened was we took the job description and then council voted on that. But I remember specifically wanting to remove the seal, and there were some members that felt strongly that the seal needed to be on there. So nothing that was on that list was not specifically requested by a member of council, just for the record. But Ms. Mackey.
Thank you. Agree completely with Ms. Malinowski. And also, I have been participated in a 360 review, think it is useful, and think, you know, it could be useful in the county attorney and the clerk's office, but would love to hear, you know, as you think about it, your additional feedback. You know, if not 360, if you've used any other tool that you want to suggest, that'd be great. But I do think the 360 tool would work for all offices.
Thank you. Okay, sorry, there's 10 pieces of plexiglass between us, Miss English, so I have to look extra hard down there. So one question that I would have, just in the spirit of keeping this going, is I do agree with the idea of having conversations with our staff about their suggestions and feedback on this process. As with other things, I think those things will proceed better if there's a timeline that's associated with that. But also, what is the process that we want to use? Is that something where we as a committee are saying, please submit that to us in writing? Is that something where you're saying, hey, Shakisa's chair, please have an individual conversation and report back? What is the method that we want to use to get that input? Ms. Mackey?
Sure. I would like for each office to communicate in writing to this committee's chair if you have any suggestions. If not, then that's fine, but I would like them to provide to you and then you provide back to the committee.
Is there a suggested time frame for that input?
Madam Chair.
Mr. Brown, hi.
Before you get into the voting mode, I think there's certainly value in capturing that in writing, but I think it would be more helpful if there's a dialogue. Because hearing you all discuss some of the things that make sense to you, and then hearing how that interfaces with the things that we're responsible in trying to get across, may get lost in translation if I write something down and you don't understand why I'm saying that. Maybe that's one member of council that was really pertinent to, but 5 other people don't really care about that. And I captured that because that member may have had a lot of conversations, and that seems to be something that's supported. That's just kind of an example of how that can get lost if you just write some things down and you're wondering, well, where is that coming from and what does that really mean from the administrator? So I certainly don't mind having information captured, but I know there would be something missed, and I think it won't be as effective if there's a dialogue. I don't know exactly how we do that.
Yes.
But again, it's kind of like this conversation. Even having this conversation with this committee about this process, there are members who are not participatory right now for whatever reasons, who then will have input that may not be captured, which will result in a disconnect in the process.
So, as an employee who has had quite a lot of experience with council, Mr. Brown, and we can also have you think about this, I'm unclear if you are suggesting that you feel that you need to have this conversation with every individual member of council who's interested or just a subset. Can you say anything additional?
I can. I would say, based on my experience, each council member at least wants to make sure their voice is heard. So whether we do that in a group setting with all of council present so that council is clear on what each other is saying, or that you agree to individually do that, it works for me. But I think only having a subset, unfortunately, you're going to have individuals who are going to potentially say, well, that's not my my view on it, and then you'll get a little bit of segmented, and so now the person that you're evaluating or conversing with, you still don't have the unity of,
Sure.
here's the direction that we're really looking for. So just something to think about, just.
Sure. Then Livingston and then Newton, because I have a question about what you're saying, because I just want to clarify what we're talking about isn't firming up the evaluation criteria. It's just getting your input on the process that we can use for evaluation, which would then come to this committee and then go to full council. So there is no evaluation criteria that would be set without the full body. Does that affect any of your comments, that
I understand
clarification?
what you're saying. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Mr. Livingston?
I was about to say pretty much the same thing. You do both. You get the feedback from Mr. Brown or other employee, and then you get clarification from him after you get that as a group. So everybody will be on the same page. Once you got that feedback from Mr. Brown, you meet with Mr. Brown, and then we decide what that really means to everybody.
Okay. Additional thoughts or comments? Mr. Malinowski?
Did ask for a time frame. We had just finished the most recent evaluation within the past couple months. It doesn't seem unrealistic that we wait until February to get the input from these 3 different offices, and then we still have plenty of time before the evaluations are going to be due. Clerk's office, an evaluation wouldn't be for, I mean, is it 1 year from hiring? So there's plenty of time in there. The administrator's probably 10 months away, roughly, from the last one that was done. Attorney, same thing, 11 months. So the fact that we have a short December and nothing in January, that's why I was suggesting February. We make sure we get the group session if we need, call it a work session, or get the feedback and then go from there.
Thank you, Mr. Malinowski. Comments? English.
I agree with that, Mr. Malinowski. That way, the new clerk and the new attorney, they can, while they're evaluating their positions and what it is that they need, they'll be able to include that in that process as well. So I definitely agree with that.
Thank you, Ms. England. So my difference of opinion there would be, I 100% agree as it relates to the county administrator, as it relates to the clerk and the attorney. I think to Ms. English's point, it absolutely makes sense for them to get a feel for their roles. I just, in all of the places that I have worked where I've had a manager, have had a situation where I've received some sort of feedback, at the 90-day mark. And so not that that's your annual evaluation, that process can continue, but I would love for us as a body, and maybe it's a separate discussion, just to have some process where we're providing some sort of interim feedback is what I'm trying to find a way to bridge. Ms. English?
I'm hearing 2 different things. I'm hearing a process, and then I'm hearing feedback. So giving someone feedback is different than trying to create the criteria for the process. I feel like we can share with them, how they're doing as it relates to their roles. But when it comes to that criteria and what they're looking at, you're talking about something totally different. So if
I could interrupt, that's what my comments were for, the process and criteria, which was a long term. If you want something else, you set that up.
Yes.
Thank you. Ms. Mackey?
Yes, they are 2 separate things, and I agree with the process and criteria. I think we do need to establish a set, time frame, if you want to say that the process for evaluation involves each office as you new people come in, there is a 90-day review. There is a 120-day review. There's something that is spelled out that we know happens, that each office will have a review by, July 1st of every year, so that there is a process that we're constantly following for each office, and that office is aware of it, and council's aware of it, and we're both agreed upon the same page, so that you're not wondering when this has happened, that we all know when it's going to happen, and we can all plan for it ahead of time. That's, in my head, what I would like to see, something written out that kind of states that we say, okay, if we agree that we're doing this 360 review for all offices, we know, okay, for the clerk's office, we need to begin the 360 review process March 1st of every year. And then it needs to be done by June 30th. Whatever that is, I think we do need something in writing that everyone knows where we're working from.
Following up on that, Ms. Mackey, we have a council meeting February 8th, so I would make a recommendation that by February 1st, all this information is received so it can be put into an agenda for this committee to review and call for a meeting on February 8th prior to the council meeting, and we can have that 7 days to review it and discuss it at our meeting and move forward from there to make some decisions then on the next meeting, which would be the 15th.
Was that a motion?
That's my motion.
Second.
Thank you for asking my question, Ms. Mackey. There's been a motion and a second. Do you want me to try to restate this, Mr. Malinowski, or would you like?
Motion is to have the 3 departments that this council is responsible for evaluating, clerk's office, attorney's office, and administrator's office.
Departments or the employees?
The departments. Did I say employees?
You said departments, but the employees, there's the 3 employees that report to
The
us.
person in charge of
Yeah.
each of those departments will provide it to us. And that is to provide whatever criteria and information they would like us to review, to consider for their evaluation during the evaluation process. That would be due to the clerk's office by February 1st to be placed in the agenda for this committee to review for a February 7th meeting. At that point, we review it and discuss it and go forward with recommendations at a February 14th council meeting. There's the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Malinowski. That was moved and seconded, but in your original motion, the committee meeting was going to be on the 8th, which you just changed to the 7th. Is that?
Well, it is the 8th, and if I, hold on. February 8th, correct. I have it written here, February 8th.
Okay, thank you. Any discussion? So I'll just add, kind of as part of this, because Ms. English was kind enough to note that we were talking about different things, that still leaves opportunity for us as a body, to Ms. Mackey's point, to come up with some recommendations on general timelines and that type of thing, but that this motion is about the input we want from our staff. So if there's no other discussion, I'll ask Ms. Only to call the roll.
Malinowski,
Yes.
Mackey,
Yes?
English,
Yes.
Newton.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. There's item C, other topics, which I think it was a placeholder from before. I do not have any other topics, but Mr. Malinowski sure does, so I'm going to recognize Mr. Malinowski.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My other topic has to relate to our next meeting, which I thought we should schedule for December 14th, to continue anything we've here discussed that we said we need to have done.
Got a motion?
Motion to
I agree.
motion to have this committee meet again December 14th. Time has to be determined.
Second.
Discussion? Mr. Malinowski, would you accept, as a friendly amendment, that we direct our staff to coordinate with all of us to get that on our schedules? Perfect. Then with that, Ms. Only, would you call the roll?
Malinowski,
Yes.
Mackey,
Yes?
English,
Yes.
Newton.
Yes?
Motion passes.
That brings us to item 5, adjournment.
Motion to adjourn?
Second.
Ms. Only, it's been moved and properly seconded.
Mackey,
Yes?
Malinowski. English,
Yes.
Newton.
Yes.